Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Jamilah Septiani from A class. In this video, I want to review the process of translations from Lutfia Ramadanti. For the first theory is the definitions of translations. According to Newmark 1988, translations is rendering the meaning of a text into another language in the way that the author intended the text. She said that the conclusions of the translations is a sense of practices by changing the source language into the target language with considering language form and equivalence. For the second theory is method and procedure. According to Newmark 1988, there are 8 methods. For the first is word for word, for the second is literal, for the third is faithful, for the fourth is semantic, for the fifth is adaptations, for the sixth is free, for the seventh is idiomatic, and for the last is communicative. According to Finais 2004, there are 12 methods. There are borrowing, calcul, literal translations, transpositions, modulations, equivalence or idiomatic, adaptations, amplifications, false friend, loss can and compensations, explicitations, and generalizations. For the third theory is process of translation. According to Bedgate's translations process, there are tuning, analysis, understanding, terminology, restructuring, checking, and discussions. And there is also overlap procedure. Overlap procedure is the procedure not linear, so the writer can do some procedure in one time. There are tuning, terminology, and understanding. So the conclusion from Bedgate procedure is analysis, restructuring, checking, and discussions. For the fourth theory is steps of translation. There are 3 steps. For the first is pre-productions. In pre-productions, there are determine the purpose of translations, determine the target audience, determine the translations, and budgeting. For the second step is post-productions. In post-productions, the writer determine the concept. For the third step is productions. In the productions, the writer create the translation by analyzing, restructuring, checking, discussions, and publishings. For the second is the process of translation by Karina Widianata. For the first theory is definitions of translations. According to Catford 1965, the translations is the process of rendering a text of source language into target language, which focus on finding or searching the equivalency target language. And according to Newmark 1988, translations is the process of rendering the meaning of the text into another language. For the second theory is type of translations. According to Newmark in Nasrum Octaviani 2016, there are 8 types. For the first is word for word, for the second is literal translation, for the third is virtual translation, for the fourth is semantic translations, for the fifth is adaptation, for the sixth is free translations, for the seventh is idiomatic translations, for the last is communicative translations. For the third theory is process of translations. According to Monday 2016 in page 8, the process of translations is source text which has original verbal language changes into the target text which has different verbal language. The process of translation according to Bedgate 1981 in Maya Martaya in 1989, there are 7 steps. For the first step is tuning. For the second step is analysis. Analysis is start to analyze the text from original text. For the third is understanding, is formulate sentences into more detailed meaning. For the fourth is terminology. In terminology, the writer find terminology for target language. For the fifth is restructuring. All of the material arranged from source language. For the sixth is checking. The writer check the result and then revise the results. For the last is discussions. The writer discussed the result with her supervisor. For the last is the process of translations according by Dwi Puji Rahayu. For the first theory is the definitions of translations. According to Newmark 1988, the translations is changing the meaning of the text into another language in the way that the author intended the text. The writer also said that the conclusions of the translations is the activity of changing the source language into the target language with changing the meaning of source language. The second theory is the process of translations. According to Mida 1982, there are three process. For the first is analyzing, for the second is transferring, for the last is restructuring. Another expert also stated that according to Margamu 1999, there are three steps. For the first is analyzing grammatical relationship between continent part. For the second is identify the meaning of semantic unit. For the third is finding the content to the meaning of the grammatical structures and semantic units. For the conclusions, each process is almost same. The translator should analyze the source language first and then transfer the idea into receptor language and restructuring the text. I think that's all. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.